Now, is that too high a price for you to pay to get rid of this? I mean, I wouldn't want my wife near death for several hours for me to erase my negative syndromes. Is there an easier way tonight for you to erase them? Could you set up a block above the line where you can't see anything bad about her? Can she do anything wrong? She's perfect. She says, get up and get your own breakfast. Say, wonderful, honey. You've been working so hard. You don't even know what she said because you always interpret everything as perfect, do you not? And is there any difference from the candlelight dinner and she says, get up and get your own breakfast? No difference whatsoever. Is she tired? She's been up all night with her little kid. And you once get a brilliant idea. You know, most generally, she's up before me. I got the most golden opportunity of a lifetime now. What can I do? Breakfast in bed. And after all, is she the queen of your life? So a little bit later, you come back to the bedroom door with a big tray. He says, oh, I'm so happy I get to give you breakfast in bed. Normally, I sleep right past this golden opportunity. Now, if you really love yourself, will you be this fanatical and hold a block so firm that you can't see anything bad, not only with your wife, but with your car or with anything else you have? Because if you start running too many things in your life down into a negative syndrome, where are you personally going to be going? I've known some men that everything away from them is wonderful. That car is the most wonderful car. I wished I had a car like that. They come over and look, oh, what a wonderful rifle. I've always wanted one like that. So he works and he works and he gets some money and he buys a car. Cheap car. He finally gets some money and he gets the rifle. These rifles jam, they're just no good. Now what is he doing? Every time he brings something into his world, he reduces it to what level? His level. Now he can't win at this game. So he finally thinks this neighbor's got the perfect wife, that neighbor's got a perfect wife. Oh, all these beautiful women in this world. Oh, if I could only get married. And he sees this queen. I mean, she is just too good for him. I mean, he couldn't even get a date with her. And circumstances are such that before he knows, he doesn't know how it happened, he's dating her. Now, is she still wonderful? Oh, yes, she's the queen, isn't she? She's still on the pedestal because she's not his yet. All right, what happens when they're married? The old lady. Because he has reduced her to his level, and she's no good anymore. Now, if you can put your blocks up here, would he be able to fill this shaded area in solid? Now, would you like to visualize that this is better than a million Niagara Falls? And is there more ecstasy here than there is in courtship? Can you visualize how much this is? In other words, just a slim line right down through the middle would be courtship. And you have added all of this depth to your intensity without losing any. Now, one more challenge. Why just hold this level of intensity? Why not go higher? Now, things change a little bit. Instead of candy, it might be that you scrubbed and waxed the kitchen floor before she came home. Do you realize that that's similar to candy? Some people don't realize that. Because they think I've got to go out and put my dollar on the line before it's worth anything. And you should open the car door. The other day I saw a couple, pure white hair. Oh, must have been past 70. I was thrilled. He opened the car door. He acted like that he had the most precious little bundle that had ever been on the earth. Then the cutest thing, he comes around and gets in, and that little old lady does what? Scoots, takes a little bit of time, comes across the seat, and snuggles up. I thought, there must be a few people who've been able to fill in the shaded area. And it's very few unless you work at it. You've got to actually concentrate. Now, does this shaded area require thought, patience, time? By the way, I'm giving you all the ingredients that no one has. But once you realize this, not for her benefit, not for the children's benefit, but for your benefit, will you not see anything wrong with them? After all, with the car, you trade it in. You don't take Junior in. Say, here he is, we have a new model. Is there a difference between people and things? Now, the very fact that there is a difference is the reason that there's a normal leveling off. In other words, this particular curve through A, B, and C is the normal curve of your marriage if you don't do anything about it. Now, if you do something about it, let me diagram the curve. It will come right up just like this. It'll have a tendency to level off, but it will go like this, and it will go through to infinity. Isn't that a wonderful secret to know? Just to think that you can have everything. You've heard the expression, have your cake and eat it? Well, this is it. This is what everybody wants. Now, in Hollywood, they try to solve the problem by new models. And I'd like for you to know, does it work? It works with cars, but not with people. I can trade a car in while I'm still increasing at an increasing rate in intensity. And I will actually love that car, but I will love the new car more. And I can keep doing this until I'll idolize this particular make of car. Now, have you ever heard people actually get to the point where this car is better than any other car, and they become ridiculous about it because they love it so much? All right, now, the reason you have to separate things from people, what happens if you try to do that with a wife? Let me show you. The first marriage, white dress to the floor, right? Full church wedding. Is it precious? Her mother cries. So in other words, everything's just beautiful. How about the second wedding? No white dress, just a few people there, and it's not in church. By the way, we're more practical now. We're not so much in love. We're going to have a dress we can use for other purposes so it won't be wasted. The third marriage. Whatever she happened to have on at the time. Didn't even buy a special dress for this one. The fourth marriage. They don't even have a minister. I mean, why fool with a minister? Justice of the peace. Do they even tell anybody this time? No invitations, no nothing. And they even make fun of it. We don't want all those cheap gifts anyway. Let's not let anybody even know. What they do in the fifth one? I think it's a waste of time, all the formalities and the legal stuff and the papers. Let's just live together for a month. What's happening with material things as compared with humans? When you trade the car in every year, you go higher and higher into a positive aura. With humans, do you stay with them forever? Can a mother tell a daughter, you're not my daughter anymore? All right, do you have to work harder with human relationships than with material things? In other words, you've got to make sure that these are spatial and that you never let that line curve down once. In other words, should you tonight think more highly of your spouse than you have ever thought of them before in your life? Now, if you can't say yes to that, what kind of a line would we have to draw for you? Well, it would have to level off, wouldn't it? And would there be a point in the past higher than the present? Then is your marriage worth anything? No. I don't think a marriage for companionship is worth it. If you don't have the ecstasy, forget it. I can have companionship with a dog. Will he give me the 4 A's? He does a very good job. Can he give me the ecstasy? No, can't get it out of the dog. So you see, this particular joy in the shaded areas, what price should you pay for it? Wait just a moment. Think. What price is it worth? There's only one answer. Whatever it costs is what you pay for it. To me, it's amazing that this particular affectional field diagram would allow us to draw thousands of diagrams just like these to interpret human behavior and to solve the problems. One of the thousands of different diagrams that we can put on our affectional field diagram is what I call our training diagram, or as referred by some people, correction. This problem has been asked many times. I understand the affectional field diagram and I'm in the positive aura, but due to circumstances I have to associate with someone in the negative syndrome. And then of course the question is, how do I handle this problem? First of all, they think that they should correct the person. Obviously, if you correct them, correction is some form of complaining or criticizing, and this would put you below the line. Now, let's examine this person. Let's look at him and see what he thinks. If he is in the negative syndrome, as you say, for one moment, let's look at him. What put him there? Obviously, he's made several decisions, and they are negative. And I would say 95% of his value judgment decisions are negative. He's the kind of a person who will say, nothing will ever work out. I told you so. All right, now, if the majority of his decisions are negative, what's the chances for you receiving a positive decision? In other words, what's going to cause him to say, you're all right? I can guarantee you that if you're correcting him, which he'll always take personally, by the way, he will never put you in the positive aura. Now, let's look at it a different way. Could it be that this negative person, in the course of a day, will have one positive affectional field? The odds are very good. In other words, they want to actually be rational. In order to be rational, they know that everything can't be bad, and therefore there might be one good decision. Now, what can you do to make sure you're the one that gets the good decision? Let me tell you how. Go to the top of the positive aura. When you see this negative person, see absolutely not one thing wrong with them. View everything as if it was perfect. Now, what happens is you actually tunnel down through the atmosphere to the rational line, and we'll assume that this is a water line, and then you put a tube down through the water until you reach them in the negative syndrome. Then you put a bubble or a balloon around them. In your diagram, in your manual, you can see this balloon. Now what happens when I pump through the tube my air from the atmosphere that I have in the top of the positive aura? Obviously, the first thing that's going to happen, the balloon's going to come to the surface, to the rational line. We've broken their block from their own side. Secondly, that balloon is going to rise in the positive aura until it reaches the same level of atmosphere that I am on. Now you say, will this person actually be in the positive aura even though they have had an average of negative syndromes all their life? Yes, they'll be in the positive aura, but only in your presence. Now, the minute they leave your presence, they'll go right back to their negative syndrome area where their average will hold them. Now, why should you ever endanger yourself from contamination with a negative person? There really is only actually one time when you should. Let's go through this rather hurriedly. If I had an employee tonight and he was in the negative syndrome, I would not do what I just suggested. I would terminate him. But if it were my spouse or my children, which are me, I would spend the required time, and normally it's approximately 5 years, and I would keep the atmosphere pumped into them and keep them on my level And guess what happens in 5 years? They actually begin to average out in the positive aura on the same atmospheric level that I'm on. Now, have we corrected them? No. Just the fact that you would think that they were negative would be proof that you've judged them, which is proof that you're in a negative syndrome and that your affectional field toward them is negative. Now, before we leave this particular diagram, let me give you one caution. Always remember that everything in the negative syndrome is only a figment of their imagination. In other words, the fear, the lie, the hate, they've made it up. It's not real. Now, if you think it's real, then you've damaged yourself. Therefore, not even for 1 second can you attribute any reality to anything in the negative syndrome. To actually add to what we've covered tonight, I'd like to go through a short review and extend some of our diagrams a little higher into some new territory. I only wish that I had time to share with you many of the diagrams that we have for the affectional field diagram, especially those in the upper levels of the positive aura in the 7th A. Let's take your manual and let's look at the first diagram. This particular diagram covers things, and approximately 95% of our population will fall into this particular diagram when it comes to things. Let's look at the diagram and notice point A. Point A is where I am increasing at an increasing rate. In other words, my enjoyment is becoming more. Point B is where I begin decreasing in intensity, and point C is when I go into the negative syndrome. Now, everything from point B on will give me bad memories. In other words, if I have traded a car in past B, and I should be driving down the highway, and I see a model of the car that I have traded in, my first reaction will be negative. In other words, I will remember the trouble that I had with that particular model of car. Then we say that this has a tendency to create more negativism in my life. All right, let's look at the second diagram. And again, this is the diagram that 95% of the people use toward people. Again, point A is the point where they are increasing at an increasing rate. Point B is where they begin decreasing in intensity. And point C is where they level off just along the top of the 4th A, appreciation. Now, sometimes they'll even go lower and drop down to approval, and sometimes down to acceptance, and then sometimes even down on the level of acknowledgement. But normally, since we're talking about people on this diagram, they never go below the rational line. In other words, they don't use the 7 O's and dehumanize the people. All right, now let's look at the third diagram. Now, this particular diagram is for 5% of the people, and again, it is for things. You notice the first A, we are increasing at an increasing rate. Now, before we have lost any of our ecstasy, we have sold the article. Maybe we've exchanged it, but at any rate, it's not in our world. Then notice the point A prime, and right on up A double prime, A triple prime. Now what we are doing is actually going higher in the positive aura with each new purchase. This is very interesting. Since material is temporary, you have to keep replacing it. And as we go higher and higher into the positive aura, we have what we call a replacement factor at point A. Now, as long as our replacement is made at the appropriate time, we will continually increase in actual ecstasy toward this particular physical object. Now, this particular diagram is the diagram that you should have in your life. This is the one that you should use and maintain on everything that is material, everything physical. I think you can see right away that each article, as it's replaced, the new article gives you more of the 7 A's. And eventually, you have a very high opinion. Now, before we leave this diagram, let's look at one more thing. My memories. What kind of memories do I have of the car that I have just traded in? If I should be driving down the street and I should see the model of the car that I used to own, all at once I have sweet memories. Wonderful things have happened to me when I had a car just like that. Therefore, as I look around in the world, all of the material things that I view add to the total ecstasy of my life. All right, now let's go to the fourth diagram. This is the diagram that 5% of the people use. And by the way, when we talk about our 5%, these are our ideal individuals that use diagrams 3 and 4. And this particular diagram, the fourth one, is for people. Now you notice at point A, again, you are increasing at an increasing rate. Now, due to the fact that people are people, and that there's some interchange of personality, we reach what we call a plateau. And this plateau is between A and B. I think this plateau is one of the mysteries that man has never quite solved, and one that we are still trying to figure out. I could give you some actual examples of the same law in other areas. For example, let's take the learning curve in psychology. It has its plateau. In other words, not for one moment should you let the plateau affect your morale. And I would suggest that when you're in the plateau area, you continue working just as hard as you worked at point A or as you're going to work from point B on. Why should you continue working when the rewards are not present? In other words, there is a delayed action for rewards. Now you notice between point A and B, am I increasing in intensity of emotion? The answer is no. On the plateau, the intensity of emotion relatively is the same. Yet I am putting more effort, and seemingly I'm putting more effort to even hold my own on this plateau. Now another example of the same law would be the pain barrier. When people are running the mile and they come up against the pain barrier. Now this is true in any type of sports, athletics. Now what is a champion? The champion is the individual who, when he encounters the pain barrier, does not slack up for one moment. If anything, if he's a true champion, this is the time when he digs in all the harder. Right now, you've seen this law in these other two areas. Now let's come back to our affectional field diagram and look at our emotions. What should you do in relationship with people after the initial ecstasy has been enjoyed by both and you're past point A? What should you do in the plateau area? Obviously, work harder than you've ever worked before to maintain your blind. Remember now, all love is blind. That's the only kind of love we have, is blind love. Now, if I maintain my blind and endure my plateau, will I eventually reach point B? And I'd like to tell you the wonderful answer to that question. Yes, you will reach point B. And then you will join the most exotic group on earth. Now, as we go past point B, notice that you go into an increasing rate up into the positive aura, increasing in intensity. Now, I like to call this actually going into what we call a rendezvous. And I like to use the illustration that this rendezvous, basically, as far as I'm concerned, is what I would call a reverie. And I think it's interesting if you'd look up in Webster what reverie means. This is exactly the kind of joys that we're going to experience in our rendezvous. By the way, you are in the 7th A. And remember, the 7th A affection is infinite. Now, it's not enough this evening just to tell you it's infinite. I have diagrammed, and it's in your manual, you can look at it, what I call the 7 R's of reality. Now remember, these 7 R's of reality take place in the 7th A in infinity. And this will help us describe the joys that await you if you endure the plateau and go past B. Number 1, rosy. Have you ever heard of looking at the world through rose-colored glasses? I like to also call number 1 radiant. It's a beautiful concept. Number 2, relaxation. Another word that I have for number 2 is renew. This is the life entirely the opposite of what we find in negative syndrome. In negative syndrome, we would find tension. The top of the positive aura, we find complete and perfect relaxation. Number 3, rejoice. You remember the first experience when we studied happiness? Here is true happiness in the top of the positive aura. Number 4, and of course this is inevitable, riches. This doesn't mean just material riches, it means all the different riches of the joys of personal relationships. I have another word for number 4, the rewards of actually enduring the pain barrier, the plateau, the learning curve, or whatever you want to call the actual area between A and B. Then I'm entitled to the rewards in my rendezvous. Number 5, romance. This is romance with everything from a flower to the queen of your life. Number 6, rare. I like to think of the actual concept of so rare that it cannot be described. Number 7, and we are way up in the top of the positive aura because we've gone 7 steps now inside the 7th step of affection. And our 7th step is rapture. Now you might wonder, can I still contain myself in a human body with this much ecstasy? Oh, I have another word, by the way, for number 7, righteousness. Righteousness and rapture. Now, if I can maintain everything physical, all material things, and if I can maintain all the people that I know that are in my world in the top 7 R's of the 7th A, I hope you're beginning to see that this is life. This is really living.